3, 2, 1.
Now call to order the meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee. I will begin by reading a land acknowledgement statement. On July 13th, 2023, we acknowledge that the sacred land in which Smith Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in making the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. We are mindful of the broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace, friendship, being mindful of generations to come. I'm John Wanless, Chairman of the Planning Advisory Committee. I'll now introduce the committee members and the staff who are in attendance at this meeting. On my right, Maria DiPietro, Yvonne Robert, and Jacqueline Grimes. On my left, Jay Brennan, Councillor, Steve Robinson, Councillor, and Planner Carl Grinke. And at the podium, we have Richard Grant. And we have Council Clerk Carrie Costello. I'll now move to item number 2 on our agenda. Can I have a motion for approval of the agenda? Moved by Yvonne, seconded by Jacqueline. All in favor? Carried. Item number 3, adoption of minutes. The Planning Advisory Committee meeting, May 11th, 2023. Can I have a motion? Moved by Steve, seconded by Jay. All in favor? Carried. Item number 4, disclosure of monetary interests.
Mr. Chair. Thanks. Due to my residence being in the area that this development, I sought legal advice from the Integrity Commissioner. So following a lengthy series of questions and answers, he determined that in his opinion, I have no conflict and I am able to participate in this discussion.
Thanks, Stephen. I'll now move into the public portion of this meeting. Purpose of this meeting is a portion of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting to consider one application that is before us. Zoning bylaw amendment application ZA-23-03, which proposes to rezone a consolidated parcel of land fronting on Main Street West, George Street North, and William Street West from the current downtown fringe and residential type 2 to a new downtown fringe special exception zone in order to accommodate a mixed-use building consisting of 36 residential units and 2 commercial units, as well as certain modified zoning standards. This meeting is your opportunity to provide any feedback on this application, and the Planning Advisory Committee welcomes any questions, comments you may have. We encourage you to do so at this public meeting, as the Planning Act rules suggest that the public's ability to voice objections later in the process may be limited if a written or oral commitment is not submitted. Town Council is the approval authority of the applications for amendments to the zoning bylaw. The committee will review the application and any comments or concerns from the public to form their recommendation to Council for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. I will now pass the meeting over to Planner 1, Richard Grant, to report on the notification and summary of consent application ZA-23-03. Following his presentation, we will open the floor to comments from the public. The applicants or the agent in attendance will also have opportunity to address any concerns brought to the floor by the public. Richard?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being part of our first hybrid meeting of the year. Today we'll be discussing a zoning amendment application for ZA 2301, which is the Main and George development, happening at 44 to 48 Main Street West, 1 to 3 George Street North, and 35 William Street West. As you can see here, here is the zoning map for the development. Outlined in red is the proposed development that forms an L shape. Around it, you can see that it's split zoned. Portions of it land in the downtown fringe zone, and portions are in the residential type 2 zone. So the downtown fringe zone really means that it's the area of downtown is closer to the residential portion. So it's the border between the residential areas and the downtown core. And then the residential type 2 zone talks about the different kinds of residences that are more likely duplexes or townhouses or sometimes single attached homes as well. So the proposed development is split between one portion being the downtown fringe, which is technically the downtown, and the other side would be the residential component. So it has 2 zones. So the application is proposing to create a special exception zone called the downtown fringe special exception, which would make a distinction between being in the residential portion as well as the downtown fringe portion. The application seeks to rezone the property from downtown fringe and residential type 2 to create a specific site-specific zoning known as a downtown fringe special exception. The DFX zone would be used to permit a mixed-use building with 2 commercial spaces with 36 residential units. Moreover, the site-specific special exception is proposed to accommodate the development concept by providing relief for certain provisions of this town's zoning bylaw, which we'll get into at a later point today. So here we can see the conceptual site plan of the development. It forms an L shape. Portions of the development has parking that would be forming a through lot, so you'd be entering from the Main Street West and going all the way through the parking lot to the other side on William Street West. And most of the development would be on the corner of George and Main. Further on the portion of the site plan, you can see that portions of it would be commercial and the rest would be residential. So most of the residential units would be on the first and upper floors, and the commercial floors would be on the lower floor. Here are the elevations of the proposed development to give a bit of context for what we're looking at. And this would be the north elevation. So right now, so the black portion would be the pavement, or rather the parking lot, as well as the green space. And then you can see the back end of the building where we have the 4 stories as well as the residential components on the bottom. And then this is another side of the elevation. This would be the west elevation. The house beside it is just giving you a sense of scale for the proposed development. And here is the south elevation. So the south elevation would be on the corner of George and Main Street. Now, the subject property contains several sites that would be demolished in order to provide the development to come through. So in total, there'll be 36 residential units with 2 ground floor commercial units and rear parking in the back for cars and bicycles. The subject property contains several buildings, including a vacant 2-story townhouse building at 1 to 3 George Street North, a vacant residential building at 44 Main Street West, and a single residential unit located at 35 William Street North. All these buildings would be removed to accommodate for the mixed-use development that's occurring, the proposed mixed-use development.
Richard, when is it appropriate to ask questions?
At the end.
At the end.
Yes,
Very good.
so
Thank you.
save your questions for the end. Sorry about that.
Solar, can't wait.
Also, the development proposes to have 9 units, which would be part of the affordable unit component. The reason for the affordable unit component is for permission for increase in residential density. Typically, when there's an increase in density, adding a density bonus for affordable units is part of their proposal. So to permit the development, they're proposing to have 9 units, which is roughly 25% of the development to be affordable units. Now, here are the zoning provisions that's being proposed for the development. So for the front end for the main street side, the minimum front yard unit they're proposing would be 0.4 meters, considering where it's located. For the exterior side yard, they're proposing to have it 1.6 meters, and the interior side yard to be 1.4 meters, and the minimum bike width aisle to be 1.2, and the parking area aisle width to be 6 meters, and the minimum distance between parking spaces on any lot would be 0.65 meters. So here we'll be looking through the existing site plan, which shows you just the configuration of the proposed development into replacement of what is going to be removed. So you can see here that there are going to be at least 3 buildings removed on that side, on Main Street West and also along William. And here are the site visits of the current proposed developments. This is what the site looks like as of July 4th. So here are some of the pieces of the official plan that was consulted in part of the planning evaluation. So we were looking at the community and community and neighborhood livability vision, as well as the infrastructure and residential land use policies. The policies for residential land use relate to just intensification for that area, as well as the targeted growth area, since the development is part of the targeted growth area for the downtown. And some of the downtown core policies that just relates to the livability and intensification of the downtown core, as well as the provincial policy statements.
Sorry, what was that last part?
The provincial policy statement, that's just a general statement that the province has in outlining what municipalities can and can't do for development.
Yeah.
And there has been no public feedback as of yet for the development. I'm assuming that any public feedback would be today. Currently, we only have feedback from the Economic Development Tourism Department as well as Public Works. Public Works has no objections to the proposed development. They only suggested that to provide an alternative 30 angle-degree parking to increase the parking aisle width, since they're proposing a parking aisle width of 6 meters. So the 30-degree parking lot configuration was just suggested to give them more space, as well as for at the site plan stage that they would have a site servicing capacity report. Just because there's an increase in density, there would just be the report to support the increase in density. There's a planned reconstruction at George Street North with additional storm sewers, and they were recommending a future connection be established and demonstrated at the site plan application stage. For the Economic Development Tourism Department, they were suggesting an additional 1.6 meter setback on Main Street to be consistent with the 1.6 meter setback off of George Street West, just to allow for more landscaping, patio or entry space for the 2 commercial units that would be on the ground floor. So the next step following this would be this recommendation made by the Planning Advisory Committee, which would be put to the council to make a decision on the zoning amendment application. This is the end of my presentation. So now you can have a chance to ask any questions you'd like.
So you're saying that this will be taken down, it's a done deal, like it's happening?
It's supposed to happen, but it's not a done deal. This
No.
is part of the, discussion portion.
Okay, fair enough. No, because the language was, this will be taken down
But
and that.
not recorded.
Yeah, so that's all. I just wanted to clarify that. Fair enough.
Any questions, Mr. Chair?
Are you finished, Richard?
With the presentation, yes.
Hey?
With the presentation, yes. I'm finished with the presentation.
Okay.
I have a
Thanks. Just hang on a sec, sir. We'll begin hearing from applicants. Any additional information or presentation. We will follow up an opportunity to the public to speak to questions. All comments and questions need to be addressed through the chair. Please be advised that the verbal comments form part of the public record, and as such, we ask that you please state your name and your address and speak from the podium, please. Thank you. I will now call upon the applicant to speak to the application if they wish.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I will speak to the application. If I could, just maybe you can control the slide and go back to the exceptions that we're proposing. And I'll try and explain to everyone why we're proposing these exceptions. So before I get started, my name is Chris Clark. I work at Zanderplan in Perth. So we are the applicants for Hammer and Nails Developments. All right, so based on the site layout, looking at the options for where parking and buildings would go, the obvious location for the building was at the intersection of Main and George, with the parking being more towards the rear, extending out to William Street. It's just the best sort of overall orientation to get all the parking required for the building without needing exceptions for parking itself. We really wanted to try and make parking comply because we don't want to, propose a bunch of units and then not have the parking to support those units. So that was partially the reason for designing the parking the way we did. In terms of the yard setbacks, now if you have the package that was given to everybody, there is a survey in the package. I believe it's Appendix D. So I just want to point out on the survey here, it picks up the locations of existing buildings. And I want to point out before we get into the exceptions that the existing townhome fronting to George Street actually encroaches into the town's road allowance. If you see parts 9 and 10 on the survey, that shows the area of encroachment. So right now the building is actually in the road allowance partially. The same is true for the building at 44 Main Street. It is also encroaching into the road allowance. So to go to the proposed exceptions, the front yard would be Main Street. We're proposing to shift the development back onto the property so there's no further encroachment into the road allowance. The setback is minimal. It's only 0.4 meters, which is a little over a foot. We feel this is appropriate given the existing setback of buildings, but also that these will be commercial units. The goal is to have a sort of walkable feel to the neighborhood. We want people to be able to walk right into the commercial units off the street, park on the street and just walk right in, rather than have to walk through the site to get to these uses. In terms of the exterior side yards, so that's the George Street side. The minimum is 3 meters. We are proposing 1.6. That is an improvement of nearly 2 meters over what's existing. So the building will actually be about 8 to 10 feet further back from the road than the townhome is now. So the hope is with the increased profile, getting a bit further back from the road will make the building appear a bit less intrusive on the actual road itself. The side yard, interior side yard setback, that's on the east side, which is 44 Main Street, that side of the property. The existing building is essentially right on the lot line. So the proposal is to move it about 1.2 meters over for a proposed setback of 1.4. So that will actually increase the setback to the abutting use by about 4 or 5 feet. In terms of the minimum bike aisle width. Now, if you refer to Appendix B, in the parking area, there's 3 small little rectangles that you can see. One is in the 1.8 meter maneuvering aisle, and the other is next to the compact only car space. Those are posts that come down for an overhang that extends off the back of the building. So the reason that the bike aisle had to be reduced by a foot was because of those posts. So we felt that rather than reducing parking lot size or parking space sizes, having a smaller aisle to get your bike to the bike rack shouldn't be a constraint on using that bike rack. The parking aisle width, there was a comment made about or angled parking, 30-degree angled parking. The problem with angled parking is it takes up significantly more room than perpendicular 90-degree parking does. It would get us slightly further from lot lines and would allow us to have a slightly wider aisle, but it would also require us to be deficient in parking. So by having the 90-degree parking, we meet the parking requirement and don't need exceptions for that. The result, though, is because we're limited in the width of space we have, to get complying parking space aisle depths, we had to reduce the parking aisle slightly from 6.7 to 6 meters. And we feel this is appropriate because this will be a one-way aisle. You'll enter through Main Street and you'll exit onto William Street. There won't be cars moving both ways on the site. They'll all be going one direction. And prior to the bylaw changing in 2022, the minimum aisle width was 6 meters in the town at that time. So most developments you'd probably see around town would have minimum 6 meter two-way aisles. So we're proposing a 6 meter one-way aisle. And that should give enough room for parking maneuvering, and it allows us to move the parking from less than a foot from the property lines to over 2 feet from the property lines, which gives us enough room to install opaque fencing along each side to screen the parking out from any residential uses on either side of the parking lot. So those were the reasons for asking for those exceptions. And like I said, we did investigate angled parking. It really wasn't feasible. And the other thing we did really focus on was the profile next to the building on George Street. There is a residential unit there, and we were limited by the official plan to 3 stories next to it. That's why the building steps up as you go closer to Main Street. So I think overall, that sort of explains the exceptions we need. So if anyone has any questions, we'll take those down. And if you want to give your names and your addresses, we'll make sure to take all of them down and address each of them accordingly. Thank you.
Any members of the public who wish to speak to this application are asked to please approach the podium one at a time.
So my name is Terry Watkiss. I live at 45 William Street West. So in the perspective image that was presented earlier, if we could get that back up, please, Richard.
So which one? Just let me know which one it is.
The three-dimensional, well, yeah, that one, I guess the 3 views. I would have to say that the side yards that are in the application and to the smaller distances, and I would have to question whether this 3D view actually reflects those dimensions, because I don't believe it does. So Chris, if you could comment on that, I would appreciate it.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, the elevations were done by Jeff Hodgins Architect. I agree it doesn't show the dwelling on George Street right now. That would actually be to this side of that brick veneer that you see on the closest part there. I mean, I can have Jeff look at it, but I can't really speak to what he's shown in the elevations here.
Okay, so let me follow up with my second comment, and that is there is absolutely zero provision for snow clearing in the plan as proposed. So I would appreciate, Chris, if you could comment to that.
Through Mr. Chair, snow storage will have to be accommodated as part of the civil design for the site. It's all going to depend, like we do have quite a bit of parking here, so snow storage is going to have to be removed from the site as far as I can see. There's no spot to store it on the site. So I would think a requirement for this development will have to be that snow is removed from the site and brought somewhere else. That's the only way I can see it would be taken care of.
So this question, Mr. Chair, is how does the planning approval process deal with that kind of snow removal? or does it?
I think in most cases, like they've met the criteria as far as the number of parking spaces for what they're proposing to develop. But in most cases, like if you look at many parking lots around town, they take care of their own snow removal, and if they have to remove it, they have to remove it. Jay?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, what we're talking about tonight is a change in the zoning itself and approval of the concept, and the proponent has a few requests for alterations. But when it gets, once the and Carl, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but once we approve the zoning change, then it goes to a site plan approval. So once that happens, then those types of questions will be answered, and it would go through Public Works Department as well. So that would be addressed, in my view, at that stage.
Well, if I may reply to that, I would think that we have side yard minimums for precisely, addressing where do we put snow when we're clearing, driveways, parking lots, that kind of thing.
Right.
So I think that it's actually very essential at this forum to address the side yard changes, because I think there is a major problem with this design relative to snow clearing.
As I said, it was a good question. I'll look to Carl to talk about process, but that's my understanding of the process. It'd go through site plan approval.
Carl?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Brennan is correct. If council approves the zoning, then site plan approval would be looking at the nitty-gritty elements. I think it's a fair point in terms of the overall function of the site. Obviously, council needs to be satisfied that the site will function as part of before the zoning gets approved as presented. So that is one thing. At this point, we're here to hear comments and feedback from the public. This will be noted, and we will have a look at that, and that can be addressed and responded to in consultation with our colleagues in other departments.
Okay, I would just say from my own experience living at 45 William Street West, the prevailing winds are from the west. We have a 5-story structure that is going to be an obstruction to that wind. And if it's carrying snow, that snow is going to be dumped in that parking lot. So I think this is a significant issue that needs to be addressed. So my next point is impact on William Street of traffic. So the vehicles exiting this parking lot, William Street West is already a busy thoroughfare, and I would really like to understand how that factors into the planning process.
Well, again, like Jay mentioned, we're here, we can, again, that would be addressed too through the site plan approval, like, Jay, you want to speak?
Yeah, I think also included with traffic, as we've talked about different developments, i.e. we've talked about a long-term care home over on off of Pearl there, and traffic studies are part of that. So that I would assume would be part of this too.
Part of the site planning process. Okay. One of the things that I think is missing from this discussion is an area elevation plan. This is a significant structure in the area, and I don't think that we have any real understanding of the elevation of adjacent properties. I mean, obviously the church across the road is a large structure across the road on George Street, but I think it would be worthwhile to see sort of what the area elevation looks like, so we can have an idea of, oh, there's a 5-story building, and how is that going to impact sunlight and shadow in the surrounding area. So that, to my mind, is a missing element. Chris, I want to talk to your comments about the side yard, the east side yard, and indicating that you've gone to 1.4 meters, but that's only for sort of a short distance back. And then along the parking, it's 0.6 meters, I believe, or 0.65. Right. So I think that was not clear to the audience, and I think that that needs to be. So if, Richard, we could take another look. Is there one? No, I guess we don't see the actual looking back along the.
Well, let's take a look at visit photos. Maybe that helps.
Yeah, not really. So, well, perhaps if you could go back to the site plan, please. So you'll notice.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Let me go to the conceptual one since that's the
No, actually, I wanted the
original.
Yeah, the drawing.
Okay, let's go with that.
There we go. So if you look down in the bottom right corner, you see, I believe that's an F. Is it F42? Oh, I guess there's one more. There's a prior one to this. Sorry.
Oh yeah. Go to the conceptual.
Yeah. This one, yes. So down in the bottom right, it says commercial, and then to the right of that, it says 1.4 meters. But when you go to, I'll call it the back end of that commercial, then of course the parking, and there's that dashed line going up, but the parking lot, or the parking spaces actually come very, very close to the lot line. I guess that's 0.65 meters. So I think, I just wanted to clarify that point because not everybody might understand that. My last question is the exterior finishing. I know this is a site planning meeting, but we have seen the 3D view, and I just have a question about whether it's going to be black like it shows on the 3D view, on the perspective view.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Dylan might be able to answer that. I don't know what materials specifically are being used by Jeff Hodgins here.
Yeah, I was actually looking at the view from George Street. Yes, I mean that is a fairly dark facade presented in that, and I think that's something that is concern to other residents.
Yeah, we're not dead set on having it to be black. The architect chose black for the tin roof of the mansard roof because it's black tin. But
right.
Below that, we're not picky. We'll listen to the community about what they want to see.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Hello. I'm Heather Curry. I live at 38 William Street West. None of this, like I realize that the biggest impact, of course, is Main and George, but we haven't really even looked at the impact on William Street. We don't even have photos of it necessarily. Like, you know what I mean? When you look at the yellow house that's going to be torn down, and that was the woman who left crying, that's her home. So that's part of it. It's an affordable house for 3 adults and a dog. They would not fit into an apartment unit necessarily. So she's greatly impacted, and that's kind of affecting my mood today. But oh yeah, there it is. So if you see the big giant mature maple that's on there, and you look at the maples on Chris's house across the way, when you look down that street, it's very much a residential street. The big trees, the homes, I realize a little bit further down William Street, it's more commercial. But once you get to our end, it's very much all homes. So now we're talking about taking that down and making it concrete. There is a little bit of landscaping at the front, like 1.7 meters. And what is that? What am I, about 1.7 meters? You know what I mean? So it's not really very much. It's going to change the whole character of our little neighborhood, and we all know each other as neighbors. We all share each other's things. And so instead of, looking at this beautiful mature tree and the shade and whatnot, we're going to be looking at concrete and car butts, basically, right? Through you, Mr. Chair, I am wondering how tall the fences will be. I'm worried about the lighting, whether the lighting will spill over into our homes. I've been there 25 years. Chris has been there longer, I'm not against, I'm certainly not against progress. I'm not against housing. I'm not against affordable housing as long as there's a stipulation that it's ongoing for a certain number of years and that it actually serves the people that need to have those residents. But I am quite concerned about the lack of trees, the change of, in 5 years that concrete is going to be cracked. It's going to be beautiful, of course, when it's first built, but I think after a few years, it's going to run down like everything else runs down. We've got snow removal and winters and concrete. So I think those were my main points, was just I'm worried about the finishing and how it's going to impact William Street as well as everybody else's concerns. Into the shadowing study. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hi, my name is Nancy Davey. I live at 40 William Street West. And I guess my questions are, in terms of the parking lots, is there one parking lot per unit that's being allocated, or is there more than one? Right now, there is a huge problem with parking at the corner of William Street West, where I live, and George. I can sometimes hardly get out of my laneway. There's so many people parking on George and William right now. So that would be my first question, is how is parking going to be handled to accommodate this new 36 unit apartment building when we've already got another apartment building further down, which is also new, which is housing another 30 some people. And I guess what attracted me to the area that we're in now is also the history. I live in a house that dates from 1870. There's a beautiful church around the corner. Many of the homes in this particular area, even though we are on the fringe of the downtown area, are historic. And that is part of what attracted me to Smith Falls. So I'm wondering, Mr. Chair, if the builder is going to consider any elements that will bring in some history that it could blend in with the neighborhood. I know that your zoning application seeks approval to ensure that it harmoniously is compatible and integrated into the neighborhood. I cannot see, honestly, from the drawings that are being presented here today, how that is going to fit into the neighborhood and look good. It's just not going to look good. 5 stories high, even the hotel on the main street is not 5 stories high. So I'm concerned as a resident of this town. I'm a new resident. I've only been here 4 years. I'm concerned about the building and how that's going to affect our homes with blasting. I'm concerned about the neighborhood changing. I'm concerned about the environmental assessment that'll have to be done in terms of digging and having that all being okay so close to the canal. So I just have a few concerns with parking, as I mentioned, and the heritage element in that neighborhood. Those are my concerns.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I just want to comment on the parking, since we've really sort of addressed that quite a bit throughout the process. So on the site plan, there's a total of 42 spaces shown. That would allow for 1 space for each of the 36 residential units. That also allows for the required visitor parking rate to be met, and still leaves 2 spaces within the main parking lot for parking for the commercial units for people actually working there. So based on this layout and the number of parking spaces proposed, we wouldn't require or need to use the on-street parking for any of the residential component. So the plan was all along to try and meet the parking requirement on site to not exacerbate or create any new parking concerns in the neighborhood.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Chris Elmsley. I'm at 34 William Street West. Yeah, I'm just wondering, in your considering changing this zoning, if you're looking at the like how the height of the building will affect the properties. Like I'm on William Street, sort of right where the driveway exits from this proposed development, and I'm just wondering, like, how that'll affect my my sunshine in my yard, or like if I'm gonna be in the shadow of this huge building all the time, or it's hard for me to really to imagine where the sun will be and where the building would be and all that. So I think that's something that's usually considered when you are proposing a development in a residential neighborhood, isn't it? Is the effect on the neighboring properties. And I'm asking a question here. Yeah.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there's been several questions on the shadowing. So our official plan, that's our guiding policy document that explains where and when and what we look for in supporting development applications, requires the submission of a shadow study for any proposal that is over 6 feet, or sorry, over 6 stories in height. So the plan does not require the submission of a shadow study for a development of this size. However, ultimately the Planning Advisory Committee and Council has the ability to certainly to follow up on and investigate any work or any technical work that would be needed to help them come to an educated position on the application. But I just thought I would advise on where things stand, at least from an OP perspective in terms of shadowing.
Oh, thanks. That's good information. Oh, what was the other thing? I forgot my other point. So shadows. Oh, and traffic. Yeah, I'm just wondering again about the traffic. Because like has been said before, there's another development down the road. But I guess this isn't really the forum where you consider. Oh, I remembered the other thing. It was with this change in zoning. So they're changing the portion that's on William Street. That will change to an exception. And what future uses could that allow when they have an exception zoning like that? Like right now it's residential on William Street. And this is seeking to change that to a fringe exception.
Carl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the zoning bylaw for the area, and this property it's a bit unique just in terms of the zoning complex or the zoning context. There's kind of two separate landscape characters associated with it. One is sort of the edge of the downtown area along Main Street that's zoned downtown fringe. The downtown fringe zone allows ground floor residential, ground floor commercial, allows upper story residential. There's a list of permitted commercial uses that are allowed there. The remainder of the property, say along part of George Street and then along William Street, that part is zoned and designated residential, recognizing that particular landscape character there. It's a fundamentally residential community. So the application proposes to create a downtown fringe special exception zone. So if council approves the zoning, the downtown fringe standards, including the height, the density, all of those requirements would need to be met. The special exception in this case is there's a couple of areas where the development that's proposed doesn't meet a couple of the provisions of the zone, as was noted earlier. So some of the setbacks, they can't meet some of the setbacks. Aisle width of the parking, there's a few of the zoning standards in there, and this application seeks council's approval to vary a few of those zone exceptions. So the application does not propose a different range or array of uses compared to what the downtown fringe zone allows. It's simply the exception are some of those standards.
Because right now it's residential across the street from me, where that yellow house is, and that's going to change now to a downtown fringe zoning. That's right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the proposal is to change that to a downtown fringe zoning. That's correct. So council has the ability through this application to specifically require that anything off of Main Street, there be nothing other than residential or I suppose parking, but no commercial uses on that side of on that side of William. Those are the sorts of technical pieces that certainly council can look at as they evaluate the application.
Okay, so this council, the zoning group?
This, the Planning Advisory Committee is a body that's appointed by council. They make a recommendation to council. Council has the final say on whether the zoning should be approved, not approved, or modified in some way. But they will.
Because that's a modification that I think would make people feel better, make me feel better anyway, if there was, say, a moratorium on building a big store right there or something like that. If William Street was kept as for residential uses, even though it's zoned differently, yeah, I think that would be something helpful.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
One more.
Terry Watkiss, I have one more question. In regards to the shadow plan, as Carl explained, it's only required for buildings over 6 stories. I would like the Planning Advisory Committee to require a shadow plan for this development, because I think it has enough impact that it's something that should be looked at as part of the council approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Jay?
Yeah, I just wanted to point, if we're looking at the screens, we do have another member of the Planning Advisory Committee here. Stephen McGuire has been here joining us virtually. I don't know if he said that.
Yeah.
You did? Okay, sorry, I missed that. I just noticed him.
Anyone else?
Can I just say Chair, one more question, one more just comment, and then I'll make it quick. Just to Chair, I'm wondering if the town would consider monitoring the traffic. I know that there seems to be a monitor right now on, I believe, George, in terms of traffic going down there. And I'm wondering if the town would consider monitoring the traffic on William Street so that we can get a good handle of the traffic that's actually going down there. Because there is going to be an increase in that traffic when the other building is completed and there's people in that building, and then now with this proposal. There's also 2-hour parking allowed until you get to William and George, and then after that there seems to be not really a lot of restrictions in terms of that corner. And so that is something that I would ask that be looked at in terms of how the people who are living there now are going to be able to handle the traffic on the streets in terms of parking and that type of thing, to be able to handle this new infrastructure. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I have one more. I'm wondering, when she mentioned infrastructure, I'm assuming that the sewers, because I know we still have the old sewers that they had on Beckwith Street down George. Like, are they going to handle all of these extra toilets that are going in?
Sure.
Stephen?
The George Street is on the books to be redone with sewer and water. It's not going to happen this year, but before that development's done, I'm sure that's going to be taken into consideration, because
Okay.
I don't think the addition of 36 more units on the corner would, I don't think it'd handle it.
No, agreed. Yeah, exactly. And it's already
George
going into the
Street is
river. And it's
on the
already...
books to go from Strathcona to Gladstone.
Okay.
I would just add that Public Works have seen this as well, so
Right, of course.
the capacity will be there.
Fair enough. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Carl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a quick note: a traffic brief was submitted as part of the application, and it felt that it advised that 19 peak hour trips, which are 0.3 trips per minute, the conclusion of the traffic brief, which was accepted by the Public Works Department, will have a negligible impact on the traffic network. Therefore, the proposed development will not impact the traffic and in the proximity and on the external network of the town. As per the traffic study guidelines, a detailed traffic study is not required if any development generates less than 75 peak hour trips. So that was an advice provided to us by a traffic engineer. Certainly, if there's any, if the committee has any specific follow-ups or additional information that they would seek, then planning staff would be pleased to take that back to the Public Works Department for feedback.
Thanks, Carl. Okay, moving on.
If I could just, how would that information come to the participants in this meeting? So you just, Carl, sorry, you just related a traffic study or a traffic report. And is that something that will be copied on as an output to this meeting?
Carl?
Through you, Mr. Chair, any information that's submitted in support of this application is public information. So you certainly have. So upon request, if you were to reach out to myself or Richard, we can provide you that information. As far as the next steps on this application, I'll await the committee's direction. The committee can make a recommendation this evening. The committee can defer a recommendation if there's certain things they want investigated. But the committee does meet on a monthly basis. So I'll wait for the committee will direct on what steps they want to take, but I can certainly assure you that council and committee members take seriously our duty and obligation to consult and be open and transparent with their planning decision making.
Thanks, Carl. Moving on, are there any questions or comments from committee members? Yvonne?
I do have a question on the 9 units that are guaranteed to be affordable. Can we know how the affordable is calculated and how those 9 will be guaranteed to remain as affordable?
Can you answer that, Chris, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I know we talked in the pre-consultation with Mary about affordability. She seemed to have quite a bit of knowledge about how that works and how that's applied and what that means in terms of how we guarantee that they're going to remain affordable. I don't know if there's provisions under the policies that the town has for implementing that at site plan. I don't know the town's policies on affordability well enough to comment on that.
Do you have any information on that, Carl?
Yes, so I think through you, Mr. Chair, in the past with other similar applications, typically the town and the proponents would enter into an affordability agreement. And this is something that can be a condition of final zoning approval. The affordability agreement would define how affordability is measured and define a period of time in which it lasts, as well as some monitoring. So council recently adopted a community improvement plan that has affordable housing provisions in that case, where and it's fairly regimented how affordability is defined and administered. So that's certainly an option that we can relay. But from my perspective, I think as staff, I would that we would like to have that defined as part of the part of a future report to council, just so that everybody's on the same page as to how affordability is administered and guaranteed for a meaningful period of time.
Thanks, Carl. Is that, anyone else? Jay?
Yeah, I'll just make some comments, Mr. Chair, and I really appreciate the feedback that we've received tonight. And I'll let you know that this is the first meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee in person in over 3 years. And so how refreshing to have people come here. I'll tell you that there's more people here tonight that come to a council meeting. So that shows your interest. I really appreciate it. And the feedback as well. I mean, the comments here are they're valid, and I think that they can be addressed when we talk about when we're going to a site plan on this particular project. I'll be certainly keeping it in mind, and when it comes to council. So I appreciate your feedback. I will say that this particular property has been derelict and abandoned for quite a long time, and I'll say probably close to 30 years. I don't know what the time frame is, but ever since I've been on council, people have always said, "What the heck are they doing with that row house? It would be so nice," and it was forgotten and forlorn. And now we have some people that want to invest. We're trying to do infill and make the downtown more vibrant. We want more people to live there, and I think this project is, quite frankly, quite exciting. So I'm really happy to see it come forward, and I certainly understand the people that live in the neighborhood, their concerns, and the people on William Street. I don't think it's the intention to make William Street a commercial street. It's just that it's actually, it makes sense to have that access there, and someone, we talked about the traffic study, and I think that you guys can certainly have a look at what was received by Public Works. So I'm going to support this application to change the zoning, and the important part is that you've given your input, and we've got your information, so you'll be kept up to date with what's going on. But I'm going to support this at this committee level to go forward to council.
Thanks, Jay. Committee, Jacqueline, yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just a question, maybe for Carl or the applicant, just about the street view from William Street. Has there been any discussion about the exit onto William, the landscaping? I know this isn't a site plan control, but has there been any discussion about a little bit of green space or keeping that maple, if that's possible? I don't know where the driveway will end up being.
What's that?
I defer to the applicants for their and the tree.
Through you, Mr.
Chris,
Chair.
can you answer that, Chris?
Yeah, so I mean, looking at where the location of the tree is now, I know that sidewalk is quite a bit off of the front lot line. So it's possible that tree is actually in the township's road allowance and not even on the property. And based on the design of the site, we did propose a narrower egress out of the site onto William Street. It's only a 3.5 meter driveway. It's sort of centered in the 6 meter aisle right now, but considering how traffic moves up at the right side of an aisle, we could look at moving the egress over a little bit and get it a bit further from the tree, and hopefully that will allow us to maintain that tree. There is a 1.7 meter landscape buffer before the parking starts. So if that tree falls in that landscape buffer, that could be a good opportunity to keep that tree in place. But I can't comment as to, once construction starts, if this is ultimately approved at a site plan level, is it going to kill the tree if they start, excavating the house there's more that goes into it than just keeping it. If you're gonna keep it there just to die, then, it's probably not gonna serve the purpose for which you're wanting to keep it there in the first place. So I think that's something we really need to look at the site plan stage. We haven't done a landscape plan yet because obviously the zoning has not been approved. And that's where detailed design will come into play. So we'll do our best to accommodate that for sure.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Joshua. Do you have any comments, Stephen? Thanks, Stephen. The committee is tasked with making a recommendation to council on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If the committee is ready to do so, I will now entertain a motion for recommendation to council on the application.
I'll move it.
Moved by Jay, seconded by Yvonne. All in favor? Carried. Thank you for attending and participating in the planning process of application ZA-23-03. Anyone requiring further notice regarding the application is asked to leave their full name and mailing or email address in the sign-in sheet located at the table by the door. Appeal rights, as prescribed by the Planning Act, will be the outline of the notice of decision. If you have any questions on this application or the process, I invite you to get in touch with our senior planner or planning coordinator. This now concludes the public meeting portion of the Planning Advisory Committee. We will now move on to the next item on our agenda. Item number 6, priority issues. Item number 7, project updates. Official plan update, Carl Dranke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep this very brief. As committee is aware, council has directed staff to undertake an amendment or an update to the town's official plan. The update, of course, is intended to address and implement some of the various studies and master plans we've undertaken in the last several years, and also investigate how and where growth is going to occur over the next 25 years. As a precursor to that, council has approved a land need study that was undertaken by Dillon Consultants that confirmed that we do need additional land for employment and residential lands beyond what we have currently designated for that. So this official plan review will be investigating how and where we want to draw the lines for where residential and industrial and commercial development will occur. So that will be underway. But what I also wanted to update the committee on is we'd undertaken a community and stakeholder survey, just doing a little bit of high-level visioning, just to get a flavor from the community, what they want to see within the next 25 years in the town, what they want to see improved, and just provide us some vision words for what an ideal town of Smith Falls would look like in 25 years. We got 34 surveys, which for something of this nature is actually a pretty good number. We're quite happy with that, and a very high quality submissions as well. Staff will be bringing forward an update to committee of the whole on July 24th, summarizing the findings. I think at the end of the day, I think a lot of what we hear around this table is what we've heard from the community, that the residents want to see a town that is growing, prosperous, but also inclusive. It's affordable. It has livability is considered. So I think there will be a little bit more information, but I welcome committee members to have a look at the upcoming July 24th the council report. This information will be on there. In the fall, we're looking at hosting some public information or some public workshops on specific themes that are identified. So one theme, for instance, could be housing, and we would host a workshop from anyone who wants to participate and guide us on that. So we will be looking to hire a consultant to help us undertake and facilitate some of that work. But I think we're going to have some very interesting work to do in the next coming months and into the fall.
Thanks, Charles. Our next meeting, the Planning Advisory Committee meeting, is August the 10th, 2023. Can I have a motion for adjournment? Jacqueline, before you leave, I have a question. We've been asked, like, we now look after property rights, eh?
Property standards.
Or property standards?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, who moved the adjournment? I'm just trying to catch up on the minutes.
Jacqueline. You know where I live? And on Winifred Street, at the corner of Winifred and Mary, or William. Second house in, going north. Now, I don't know whether there's anybody living in there or not, but it is a total mess.
Phone the town. Goes through bylaw first.
But what I'm getting at, the people that have the apartment across from me on Mary Street, he has caught 2 rats on his deck. And I think that's where they're coming from.
Call the town.
Get out your gun, John.
You phone the town?
Well, I want to get my gun out for about 20 squirrels that are on my deck all the time.
Phone 4124 and they'll say,
So just to
for a bylaw?
No, but does property standards not fall?
That's bylaw.
So what falls under us are property standards appeals. So if somebody makes
If somebody else made an appeal, then we,
exactly.
yeah.
So we haven't.
It doesn't happen.
We haven't assigned. We're not. The bylaw is still responsible for issuing the orders, investigating complaints. But if somebody gets a complaint, gets an order, appeals that order, then this group does that. Yeah. So in the last 4 years, there was one appeal.
One in my 13 years. Yeah. One. And they hadn't met for 13 years, and that after they met, they disbanded them.
It was lively, from what I understand.
It was. I just watched it. I wasn't there.
Do we know if the next meeting is at 4 or 5 o'clock? Or do we know that?
So we don't have an application on. We don't have any applications at this point. So it is possible you may get an August off. We'll know within the next couple of weeks whether there's a site plan we need your review on, but.
Are we done?
I have one more
We're done?
question.
We're done.
Okay.
Okay.
So why didn't we see the truck? Like you brought that up. I wasn't that part of the package that we saw.
A party, this is not a party.
Could have been, on the other hand, you did have the report that the Public Works looked at it and